Your friends are going to be your lifeline throughout your life. These are the people you can depend on.
Yep.
So romance is all very lovely. If you want to marry men because you want to have children or something like that, that's terrific. But I would say you need to nurture your connections with your friends. Give them the same grace you give to these trifling ass men.
Yes.
Because you are going to need their support.
I learned this the hard way at a very young age, but it wasn't even like with romantic partnerships in terms of not being able to depend on men for like anything. This was like my male friends. Now, okay, I do have male friends now who absolutely would show up for me, but those are men who have been really doing the work, right? Understanding their entitlement under patriarchy, understanding that loving and caring for people and pouring into people and nurturing people and spending time with people and helping them move and all that stuff is important in terms of relationships, not just with romantic partners, but with friends, with family, whoever it is in your community, right? But when I was younger, in my 20s, and I worked as a raft guide, I was in mostly male-dominated spaces. And in the rafting world specifically, it is very toxically masculine, even though sometimes it's like these like hippie bros, they're still the same. They're like frat bros with ponytails, and Patagonia. But they're the same. They're the same in terms of their like misogyny. It's just hidden, right? And when I tore my ACL at the age of like 22 or 23, I was living in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, making like no money, sleeping on an inflatable mattress on a floor. And the rest of the year I lived in my truck, okay? Because this outdoor world does not pay well. So anyway, luckily I had insurance. Now they ended up going back on it and ended up owing them $26,000, which took me over 10 years to pay off. But that's another video. But at the time my insurance said they were going to pay for this surgery, I got surgery. It's the first time I've ever had surgery. First time I've ever spent the night in the hospital. First time I've ever like been in anesthesia or whatever. And I was scared. I'm thousands of miles away from my family. And my closest friends at that time were mostly men, with the exception of like 2 women. Because luckily, having grown up in a household with a single mom and a sister, and even my dog, Fifi Marie Hamlet, was a female. It was like, us worked in one house, right? So I was so used to just women in my life. My mom, all of her friends were single moms too. And so I grew up with an example of women helping each other, women, pouring into each other, all that stuff. So what a rude awakening I had when I entered a world where all my friends were mostly men. But I luckily intuitively knew I need some women around or I'm going to lose myself. Thank God I poured into those relationships, because guess who showed up for me when I didn't even think about like how I'm going to get home from the hospital. I didn't think about how am I going to get my meds. I can't drive with this thing. Like I didn't even know what surgery would involve, but my roommate, who was a woman, she got my food, she got my meds, she cleaned up my like barf bucket when the meds made me sick. Like this woman took care of me. I was like, I felt bad how much she was taking care of me. And then some of my coworkers that I was like hardly even friends with were like showing up with tea, showing up with food, calling to make sure I didn't need someone to go get my medicine for me. These were women that I had hardly poured anything into, and yet they still showed up for me in any way that they could. But all those guys that I had worked with all summer, who I thought I was like this with, they didn't even text. They didn't do anything. They didn't even reach out to see how I was doing. Never. Because they got to ski the pow pow, bro. And I remember calling my sister because I was really hurt. It's the one time that I needed these guy friends to show up for me. Guy friends who, by the way, had tortured me a lot on the river. Drawing big, on my legs. Like, they'd kind of like bullied me a little bit as like their sister, That's another video because I didn't realize just how messed up that was. But I actually really cared about these guys. I was one of the guys, the cool girl. And I called my sister and I was like, what? These guys suck. Like they just disappeared for the whole winter because I tore my ACL at the beginning of the winter. Jackson Hole is cold as hell, y'all. It's like -20 Fahrenheit. Sometimes -30 or lower. The roads, they don't even bother plowing them. It's just a sheet of ice for the whole winter. Like, so when you were on like crutches, I had to have crampons on my crutches. I had to have like little spikes so that I could walk without sliding everywhere. But you know what? My friend Landy, who I'm still in contact with and friends with, even though she lives on the other side of the world, that woman showed up for me. That woman saved me. Her and my roommate and all these other women that weren't even in my life, they showed up. And all the men didn't do jack shit. And my sister was like, yeah, I guess you didn't realize that. You can't count on men. That's why wherever you go, Melanie, find female friends. Now, I would say like my gay friends, my gay guy friends, they have poured into me just as much as a lot of my female friends, my non-binary, trans friends. There is something about cishet men. It's not just cishet men, but it's very much a part of men who date women, right? And they just exploit women. And their mindset is that they don't have to do anything for anyone, which is why their friendships suck. Which is why I wrote this. One of the reasons why I wrote this, one of the many reasons why I wrote this, because men suck at friendship. They can be good friends, but so many of them don't want to actually have to do anything. And then when they suck at friendships, they have no friends. Their wife ends up being their only friend, and then that exhausts her. So pour into your friendships. But I would argue that most of those, if you're a woman, should be other women. Or at least not men who are attracted to you. Because half the time, again, those men are just trying to get in your pants at any opportunity anyway. But even if they're not, they don't know how to show up. Now, again, there's exceptions to that. My husband is absolutely unlearning that and has been for a while. Just last weekend, he was helping a friend move all day, right? That's the kind of stuff you're supposed to do. But so many men are so entitled that they're like, oh, I'll just go play basketball or go climbing with my friend. But when those friends get injured, none of those guys show up for them because they never had anything solid to begin with. So if these guys won't even show up for their own friends, who they oftentimes value even more than the women who do all this labor for them, that they're sleeping with, that they say they love, that they share children and bank accounts with, if they won't even show up for their own friends who they worship, they ain't showing up for you. And that's what that whole video is about, is that when you get sick, especially if he sucks, he will make you sick. Don't think he's gonna stay there and take care of you. He just doesn't do hospitals. He just doesn't like needles or whatever. Men will always have an excuse to not have to care for the very women that they claim that they love, even though those women would bend over backwards for those men to take care of them. Which is another reason why when you're dating somebody, pay very close attention to how well he takes care of you when you get sick. That's a test run, baby. If he is not, waiting on you hand and foot, making sure you're comfortable, like really nurturing you and taking care of you, not only is that man going to be a terrible father, God forbid you have kids with him, but the moment you get sick, that's when he's going to have an affair. I'm not even joking. There's so many celebrities, like John Edwards. I mean, there's so many men are like, oh, she's got cancer. Bye. We know that the statistics prove that women are 6 times more likely to be left if they get sick, with especially the terminal illness. If you are not certain that this man would take care of you when you're sick, even with like a cold, do not think that man is going to take care of you when you're pregnant, take care of you when you have any other illnesses, and definitely isn't going to take care of anyone that you care about either, even if he is literally responsible for them as well. Men under patriarchy, men are taught to be individualistic, selfish parasites. And unless they have been conditioned otherwise and have been unlearning this entitlement, this selfishness, they will expect all this stuff from you and those very things they would never do in return. In fact, they'd be insulted if you think that they would. What? I don't do hospitals. Imagine that level of audacity. Married or single, no matter what you're in a relationship or not, no matter what your romantic relationship status is, your friendships and your community should always be number one, especially if you're a woman, because those are the people that are going to show up for you when crisis happens. And we know that that crisis is just a part of life. It's going to happen. And one last thing, when you are investing in friendships, you should be vetting those friends, like the close ones. We have lots of different layers and levels of friendship, but the ones that you let close into your life, choose those just as wisely as you would a romantic partner. Those people are even more important than your romantic partner on many levels. And if they suck and they're selfish and they don't reciprocate that love and attention and time and care and excitement to see you, you might as well have just married an awful husband. Have high standards for yourself. It's life and death.